Okay, welcome back everyone, and thank you again for folks who are already in the room. As we return from the breakout rooms, hopefully re-energized, maybe a bit overloaded, but inspired, I hope you're ready to zoom out a little bit. Today has reminded us that climate security isn't a single story. It's a web of local, regional, and global efforts that all depend on each other. And as we've seen, the traditional multilateral frameworks that we once relied upon are now struggling to deliver at the speed and specificity that the moment demands. So where do we turn? Increasingly, it's regional and plurilateral actors. I had to practice for a long while to say that word, by the way, so I need some applause for saying that without slipping up. Thank you. The coalitions and alliances that are stepping up to offer context-specific, scalable, and pragmatic solutions are what we're going to discuss exactly next. How does climate security take shape beyond borders? Please welcome please join me in welcoming Emma Whitaker, Senior Advisor at Adelphi, who will moderate our conversation, and she will introduce her panelists. Thank you all.
All right, good afternoon from me again. So as we reconvene for this final plenary, I will invite us all to focus on the evolving landscape of climate security, not only in 2025, as we've so effectively done today, but also thinking about the year ahead. Years ahead, sorry. As 2025 has no doubt been marked by a year of shifting alliances, of heightened geopolitical competition, and certainly a growing recognition that climate risks are truly inseparable from questions of stability and security, and that's evident to not only people in this room, but more and more resonating with people outside the walls of this room. Multilateralism, however, remains foundational, but as we are increasingly seeing, regional and minilateral arrangements are increasingly providing adaptability and context-specific solutions that are needed to address real regional interests and priorities. These approaches certainly raise important questions about what it means to be effective in coalition building, in resource mobilization, and around the mechanics of implementation. But with these questions, we also must balance questions around possible futures of increased potential competition between regional alliances that also are built around national interests rather than global interests. So with that, I'm excited to get into the conversation today, and we are certainly joined by a distinguished panel representing a real breadth of experience and perspectives. As you can see, we also have one empty chair for an additional panelist who will be with us shortly, but we're still going to get started. So first, we have Ambassador Indra Mani Pandey, who is the Secretary General of the Bay of Bengal Initiative for Multi-Sectoral Technical and Economic Cooperation, BIMSTEC, who brings over 3 decades of diplomatic service, including leadership roles at the United Nations and the Ministry of External Affairs in India, and now leads regional cooperation efforts across South and Southeast Asia. Thank you for being here. At the far end, we have Ambassador Bakit Chusupov, who is the coordinator of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, the OSCE, and he is the head of Economic and Environmental Activities, and has extensive experience in international diplomacy, and has served as ambassador of Kyrgyzstan to multiple European countries and led strategic initiatives within the OSCE and the UN. Thank you for being here. And in the center, we have Ms. Margaret Levin, who is the Assistant Director of Climate Diplomacy Policy at the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade of the Government of Australia. And she is a career Australian diplomat, having served in Berlin, in Tel Aviv, in Stockholm, and has over a decade of experience in the international climate policy arena, and served also as a negotiator for Australia in the delegation to the UNFCCC. So we're really excited to have you all here. let's get into this. Each of you definitely brings an experience in translating policy ambition into operational reality. So I would encourage you to speak candidly about achievements, but also importantly about setbacks, so we can all learn. To help us really pinpoint the right conditions under which regional unilateral frameworks deliver measurable impact. So Ambassador Pandey, I'll start with you. BIMSTEC certainly sits at the crossroads of South and Southeast Asia, where climate security is not just a policy issue, but certainly a lived reality. Could you maybe share one or several concrete examples of how BIMSTEC has turned regional cooperation into real action on climate security? And tell us a little about what has made this possible. Was it strong leadership? Was it political will? Or maybe potentially something a little less obvious? Thanks.
Thank you so much. I would like to begin by thanking Adelphi and General Federal Foreign Office for hosting this conference and for inviting me to participate. Before I share the experience of what we are trying to do in BIMSTEC, I would like to point out that there is no binary choice between multilateralism, regionalism, or plurilateralism. I think all these mechanisms contribute and reinforce each other. So in climate change, global multilateral action remains very important. But regional organization, or what we call regional multilateralism, they can certainly play a very important role. Why so? Because they are a group of a small number of countries. It's easy to build convergences. It's easy to find solutions which are very region-specific. And also in terms of their experiences, they share similar developmental challenges, similar challenges related to climate change. For example, BIMSTEC, which is a group of 7 countries, we came together in 1997, 28 years ago. So we do face similar challenges, and that's why it has become possible for us to build this organization. We have been successful in terms of creating mechanisms. We have been successful in negotiating a number of conventions, agreement, memoranda of understanding. In areas which deal with climate change, we have a number of sectors which are linked to that. For example, we have environment and climate change as a sector. Recognizing the importance of mountain economy, that's another sector for our cooperation. We also have cooperation in energy sector, which is focused mainly on green energy transition by interconnecting the electricity grids of our member states. In agriculture, we are focused on food security, which will again reinforce the measures which we need to take to address the adverse impacts of climate change. We also cooperate in health sector where we are following One Health approach. That's an area of our cooperation. So in different sectors where we cooperate together, where we work together, we are trying to deal with the adverse impact of climate change. As we have heard throughout the day, it's a reality. And there is certainly adverse impact of climate change on some of the aspects of security also, whether it's human security, whether it's health security, whether it's food security. And through BIMSTEC, we are trying to deal with many of those challenges. We, in fact, also have a lot of focus on disaster management because our region is affected by a number of natural disasters, which have actually become more acute due to climate change. And member states are keen that we should be able to work together to deal with those disasters, both in the short term, when we deal with the disaster itself, but also in terms of long term by building climate disaster resilient infrastructure. That has been one area of focus. I would like to conclude by pointing out that BIMSTEC is not alone in dealing with some of the challenges for our region. We have been working together with a number of regional and global organizations which are involved in global climate action. And we are ready to work together with any member state or any international or global organization, which would like to work with our member states in dealing with the adverse impacts of climate change. Thank you.
Thank you. Sounds like an open invitation for collaboration, which is what we love to hear. I'll just recognize that we have Madame Maria Fernanda Espinosa, who's joined us. Thank you for coming. I guess just following up, I appreciate the reference to so many different sectors, and that truly sort of highlights how pervasive climate security dynamics are. And you mentioned a number of initiatives and important achievements. I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about some of the significant challenges. Obviously, there's many different contexts and many different sectors, but what's a particular challenge that you found in moving from agreement, for example, or an initiative into actual implementation, to actually addressing a challenge that was recognized in the BIMSTEC? And maybe any lessons or any learnings you could share about how you address that challenge, or if you're still learning, what that looks like.
I think like any intergovernmental organization where we have a number of member states, building consensus remains a big challenge. Also, we have to take into account the specific challenges faced by our member state, and then trying to find solutions for those challenges in different sectors. In challenges which relate to climate change, I think in Bay of Bengal, most of our member states face similar challenges, and that's why there has been no difficulty in finding consensus on our plan of action for environment and climate change, our mountain economy. We are in the process of setting up a center of excellence for disaster management. We already have a BIMSTEC Center for Weather and Climate, which actually engages in tailored forecasts for our member states on weather and climate. So it's assisting our member states in dealing with some of the challenges due to climate change, because the weather patterns have changed, climate patterns have changed. So the center integrates data from our member states and then processes it and makes tailored forecasts. As I mentioned, in energy, our focus has been integrating our electricity grids. We are quite close to achieving that goal. That would help us in green transition. But here again, the BIMSTEC Energy Center is trying to also focus on green energy transition by encouraging renewables, particularly solar power, and also looking at energy efficiency, because we can reduce a lot of carbon footprint by enhancing energy efficiency. So that's also a focus for us.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. It sounds like a lot of really concrete sort of technical initiatives as well that help sort of translate across the differences between those contexts. Moving over to Ambassador Chusupov, who also represents a region that spans many countries with different experiences and also particular set of sort of mountain contexts as well. The OSCE's membership is obviously remarkably diverse, and each country has, its own experiences and capacities, but also climate security priorities. Can you maybe share with us an example of when this diversity has been a strength in advancing climate security, and perhaps maybe through an unexpected coalition or an unexpected theme that brought different actors together, and if there's any learning or anything you'd like to share about the learnings and lessons from that experience?
Thank you. Emma, let me also start by thanking Adelphi and Federal Foreign Office for the invitation and providing this opportunity to speak at this conference. Indeed, OSCE is the largest regional security organization comprising of 57 participating states with different cultural, geographical, historical, political background. And also, as you mentioned, in questions of the climate policy, there are also different views, of course, starting from Arctic permafrost melt till desertification or wildfires. But in my opinion, and we believe that this diversity is also the strong asset of the OSCE, of our organization. Our landmark OSCE 2021 Ministerial Council decision already called participating states to strengthen cooperation when it comes to the issues of the changing climate. On one hand, it recognized that climate change exacerbates economic challenges and environmental degradation, also negatively affecting to prosperity, stability, and security in the OSCE region. On the other hand, it acknowledges that climate change issues related to the climate issues also can serve as an opportunity for cooperation, for collaboration, building the mutual trust, emphasizing need for good neighborly relations and intensifying cooperation and dialogue. So building on the mandate what we have, how we are transforming this mandate into the specific actions. Let me bring examples. For instance, we support participating states in Central Asia, in Southeastern Europe, in South Caucasus to jointly cooperate on transboundary climate issues and identify risks stemming from climate change and joint entry points when it comes to the climate action. This assessment work brought together national stakeholders from the regions, starting from the governmental officials, civil society representatives, public sector, public and private sector representatives, often, of course, this lately in our practice, they gather together to jointly analyze the risks stemming from the climate change, the adverse impacts of the changing climate, and identify entry points for joint cooperation. To be more specific, let me bring the example from the Southeastern Europe, where we have identified wildfires as the major concern. With the OSCE support, we have established a network of the national park authorities from 3 neighboring countries in Shar-Sara Mountains and Korab Massive area. And we provided platform for dialogue to discuss the shared challenges and opportunities for joint cooperation to address those challenges. Now that network with the support of the OSCE really works excellently, and our approach has helped, first of all, to establish this platform for dialogue, based on that platform to analyze the risks and create some joint action plan when it comes to the climate action. So this is the central of our work, and we believe that the platforms for dialogue to identify shared challenges should be key and initial starting point to foster cooperation and hence bringing trust and confidence in the OSCE region. You have asked on the lessons learned, and here I think one and main lessons learned is to support participating states and stakeholders, different stakeholders from specific region, to understand shared risks and jointly address those challenges.
Thank you. Yeah, that messaging certainly resonates with a number of the conversations we've had today about the synergies between not only dialogue but action and their reinforcing nature. And obviously what you shared has been quite positive, and I'd like to hone in just a little bit on the wildfires example or another, but wondering no doubt there will have been obstacles in this process and these processes that continue. I'm wondering if you could speak to maybe some obstacle you face, either in the wildfire example or others, that were either political or financial or technical, that impeded sort of the delivery of climate security outcomes, of addressing these sort of, identifying these challenges and then addressing them. And where have you seen progress in facing those obstacles, and where is there still some obstacles that remain?
Thanks for the question. Indeed, beforehand, joint dialogue, identifying jointly the shared challenges gives strong in sentiment and strong foundation for the collaboration and cooperation. And of course, we see more and more the approaches where we have really strong will for cooperation, but unfortunately, when it comes to the implementation, joint solutions is still a bit difficult. Indeed, and let me highlight maybe some of the points here. First of all, institutional silos, institutional gaps. Today, we have heard also from some of the speakers that unfortunately, in some of the countries, also in OECD participating states, the issue of climate change is considered as a purely environment issue, but the issue of the implications of the climate change to security, they are considered and addressed separately. I think that creates a bit of misconfusion and also missed opportunities to tackle this this challenge on a more strategic basis. OECD was one of the first international organizations to acknowledge that environment and security is very much interlinked with its 2007 Madrid Declaration on Environment and Security. That decision also acknowledged that the climate change is a long-term challenge. So bridging these gaps between environmental issue, climate issue, and security is difficult, but I think participating states must think more towards that direction. Another issue is the gaps between political and technical expertise. Having one cohesive systems, single solution to address these challenges needs political will, political agility, and of course technical flexibility as well. So this is also to connect the political and technical expertise is one of the obstacles. And this creates also the obstacles in terms of financing. Different financing the different financing models, whether it's development or it's security, so different attention to different topics, but instead of looking to this issue more strategically as a one whole sector, also it creates some financial constraints there. So in our opinion, there is strong integrated financial models or mechanisms are also needed. Another issue is data and capacity gap. Unfortunately, some of the countries are most developed when it comes to the capacity, some are less. And here, of course, OECD tries to support to translate those identified risk analysis into the specific actions, such as early warning systems, integrating early warning systems, or climate resilient measures. And also, in one hand, data sharing when it comes to the transboundary issues is also still sensitive for many countries and many regions. So what is the solution, or what are the solutions? In our experience, I think we should start from small but act jointly. From local communities, for instance. We support local communities and amplifying their knowledge, amplifying their expertise, and translating those knowledge into the more political national or regional level is, I think, is key here. Another issue is inclusivity. Of course, we have been supporting, for instance, youth in Central Asia from last year with our initiative, Drops of the Future initiative, to address nexus between water, food, energy, and climate. This initiative was based on our previous, starting from 2014, initiative on women in water and water management and diplomacy network of Central Asia and Afghanistan. So voices of the youth are also key here to address these long-term climate challenges. So OSCE provides this platform for dialogue for different multi-stakeholder actors, starting from the national governments, civil society, public-private sector, and to build these bridges between policy making and specific actions on the ground.
Wonderful, thank you. That sounds like a lot of promising action and thought processes and strategic sort of oversight. I guess now I'd like to turn to Ms. Levin, who can also contribute to the conversation around potentially this political and technical alignment, obviously from a different perspective than the last two speakers, but certainly from the one nation. Australia has played an important role, obviously, in advancing regional climate security in the Indo-Pacific. And I'm wondering if you could just share an example of sort of where Australia's diplomatic engagement has led to actionable cooperation or new partnerships in the climate security space, and what you would say were some of the critical elements in building the trust to be able to do so and sustain momentum in carrying out those actions.
Sure, and thanks for having us here, and I always love the challenge of being in an afternoon panel. Everyone's come to the end with us. So the first thing I'll say is that Australia has supported, as opposed to sort of, we've like facilitated kind of an array of new initiatives in the Pacific. And I'll give sort of two concrete examples that talk to different elements of climate security, because when we talk, what are we really talking about when we talk about climate security? There are so many different elements. So the first one that I'll talk about is the Pacific Response Group, which is, it was put together at the end of last year, and it's 19 people from the military across 6 countries, so I'm just read it so I get it correct: Australia, Fiji, France, New Zealand, Papua New Guinea and Tonga. And they've come together in response to a need around disaster preparedness. And there are these 19 individuals, and they are co-located for the high-risk weather season, so from sort of October to March, to be able to be deployed to assist sort of civilian organisations to prepare and respond in high-weather situations. And they had their first deployment in the weather season right now. And that's just one example of a totally new response to what is happening in our region. And I'll kind of go to a different end of the spectrum, a different kind of element of climate security around mobility. And I'm actually quite proud to say that I've heard the Australia Tuvalu Filipino Union mentioned here today as totally innovative solution around climate mobility with dignity. I'm not going to go into the details too much. I think everybody's sort of heard about it today. But a totally new pathway of both investing in Tuvalu so the Tuvaluans can stay where they are on land, and for those who want or need to move to Australia that they can do that. And these are completely innovative, responsive actions that we've been able to be a part of. I'll just talk about your question about momentum and trust. How did this happen? How do we get the momentum to do this? Clarity of purpose, I would have to say. And that's because in the Pacific, climate change is existential. I mean, I just don't need to say more than that. It is the single biggest threat to the lives and livelihoods of the Pacific. They signed a statement in 2018, everyone understood what it meant, and since then there has been momentum, and it's momentum through action. And, you know, a lot of the actions that we've been doing have just happened sort of in the past 2 years, and they're totally responsive to what is required in the Pacific. So how do you get momentum? What is your purpose? And start moving. The last answer is, how do you build trust? I mean, I think the answer's not going to be very exciting, but it is true, which is how do you build trust anywhere? I think you show up. You probably don't talk in the beginning, maybe. Just listen to what people have to say. You keep showing up day after day after day after day. And I think someone said it this morning, is you just put your money where your mouth is. And hopefully, I think Tony said it's not a beauty contest, but, you know, Australia, in the last 3 years, Australia has committed sort of $1 billion of climate finance into the Pacific. We've committed $100 million into the Pacific Resilience Facility. We've committed $50 million into the Loss and Damage Fund. I mean, you know, that's slowly, it's not one thing, it's building data points. So that's what we're trying to do. We'll find out if we're successful.
Thank you. I like that. That definition of trust, just showing up and keep showing up. And keeping on this theme of innovative and forward-looking, Australia has obviously just released its first national climate security risk assessment, which has provided some pretty sobering, shed a sobering light on some pretty complicated challenges ahead. Where does this leave you? What does going forward look like in the time that we have?
I'll be short and hopefully not too repetitive of the really excellent last session that we had on this. Australia just released its first integrated national climate security risk assessment. I think sobering is definitely one word for it. I wouldn't not read it at night time if anyone's interested in it. No climate reading in the evenings. It paints a pretty realistic and bleak picture of what's going to happen to Australia. Risk's going to be what was the cascading, compounding and concurrent. It's going to impact it's already and will increasingly impact every aspect of our society. Get ready for it. The economy, health, environment, infrastructure, defence and society. So we're in it. I would like to say. I think the one thing that you say is what's next for us. So from the domestic point of view, it was released, our national adaptation plan was released at the same time. That's great, very important. It was also released just before we released our updated NDC. So there's a very clear narrative. I think the question coming out of the Foreign Ministry that we're dealing with is, there was this one very confronting element in the risk assessment that said, just so you know that your risk assessment is not complete until you understand the climate risks, not only to your neighbours, but to your trading partners and your strategic partners. And that just all gave us a small moment for pause in the Foreign Ministry, because we're like, not only is that a mammoth technical task, I mean, how do we start to engage that? So our thinking very much, what's next? I think we are going to need to start talking to partners. I think it's going to be the discussion we're going to be having with partners. I think we're going to need to start talking to new partners, and it's going to have to be a fully nuanced conversation with the people that we are talking to across the suite of climate security issues, whether that's existential threats in the Pacific, to energy security and supply chains in Southeast Asia, to speaking to our European colleagues, all the way to our North Asian colleagues. I mean, we have really got our work cut out for us. I think the one line that I will end with is that while we work out how to conceptualize this, I think it's abundantly clear to us that investing our own resilience is absolutely underwritten by the resilience of others. We might be a physical island, but we think we've understood that our whole lives are completely globalized and we're fully enmeshed in the world, and we can't do this by ourselves. And I think there's a first mover advantage in getting on top of this, and that's the thinking that we're taking forward. So not really a satisfying answer, maybe. What's next? We're figuring it out.
No, thank you. And I think it sounds like that journey that Australia has gone on really encapsulates the experience of many nations of looking primarily at climate change happening outside of their own space. But then when you take a deeper look, actually, your own national security and your interest is so dependent on what's happening around you. And it just encourages more understanding and more collaboration. It sounds like also an invitation, as Mr. Pendy had suggested, for collaboration. So I hope that comes. To switch a little bit to add Madame Espinosa to the conversation, to offer an additional insight in addition to the perspectives we've had. Across your career, you've obviously you've seen both the strengths and the limitations of multilateral diplomacy. Can you maybe share an instance of where regional or minilateral approach succeeded, where multilateral approaches failed, or really struggled to achieve an end? And also if there's any lessons you can draw from that experience that would be useful for us today.
Well, first of all, thank you for the 7th edition of the Climate and Security Conference. And of course, English is not always easy for me, but I kept thinking, is it climate security or climate and security? It makes a big difference. And but what I see, number one, is I was ambassador to the UN in New York. It's difficult to say for me, but it's about 15 years ago. And we could not discuss the issue of securitizing the climate agenda. There was a lot of reluctance to discuss the issue within, in the Security Council at the time. It was extremely difficult to put the issue on the agenda first. And after a little more of a decade, we see a complete transformation of the conversation. And what I have witnessed here is an incredible development of intellect, of the capacity to understand how the two worlds intersect, because we kept saying that climate change is not an environmental problem alone. It is a security and development problem. And that's what we're seeing here. And of course, I think that the UN frameworks, the multilateral frameworks, the convention, the UN convention, the Paris Agreement, have helped a great deal to advance the conversation. Advance the conversation, be informed by the incredible knowledge that now has been produced in the last decade. But I see less of this broad understanding factored in when it comes to regulation, to policy designs that are more holistic and that integrate better. And at the national level, what our colleague from Australia was saying, how you translate this knowledge and this analysis into proper planning, national planning, subnational planning, when you build your budgets and you invest in your priorities at the national level, on how you plan infrastructure, on how you plan for jobs and health and food. And here I see that perhaps when we bring the climate community and the epistemic community of climate and the epistemic community of security come together, there is a third pillar that I think that we should push hard, which is the development pillar. Because I have heard today talking about prevention and resilience building and adaptation. And this is absolutely vital for regions like my own in Latin America. But investing in prevention at the end is targeting poverty and inequalities. And I come from a region which has enormous potential and enormous strengths and power. It's the biodiversity paradise of the planet and fresh water and everything else. But at the same time, is the most violent region, the most unequal region after Sub-Saharan Africa. and also a very, very fragile region in terms of climate change, if you look at the Caribbean, for example. So how you factored in, how you bring all this together for the right responses at the policy, at the investment level. In what I see is great developments at the regional level, the urgent need to create regional hubs, decentralized action at the regional level. You ask about minilateral, plurilateral responses to that, and we see what the work that the African Union is doing, ASEAN, all the regional configurations, less in Latin America, but we need to do more and better. I see that in terms of how we explain this convergence, perhaps the concept of human security can be helpful because it encompasses all of that. And when you say, you know, what are the examples? And we see very interesting examples in my own regions and elsewhere. For example, if we read the International Court of Justice advisory opinion on climate, then we see with clarity, you know, grounds for environmental litigation. We see grounds for climate security, not only climate and security, but climate security. If we look at the very recent, actually, advisory opinion of the Inter-American Court of Human Rights in our hemisphere, I think that multilateralism delivers. It states for the first time that a healthy climate is an independent human right. That, I think, helps to say that nature is a rights holder, also helps. And I'm very proud to say that that was, I think, inspired in the Ecuadorian Constitution of 2008 that provides rights to nature. And the Escazú Treaty of 2021 that protects human rights defenders' access to environmental information and justice. And in all these instruments are not called pieces of paper. They really call for agency. They really call for a serious accountability. It opens space for climate litigation. We have seen very successful climate litigation examples, and these are very important multilateral tools. What we are seeing. You said minilateral agreements. For example, Ecuador signed a peace agreement in 1998 with Peru. It wasn't in the map, but we kept fighting because of our borders with Peru until 1998 in Ecuador. And one of the outcomes of the peace agreement was this binational biosphere reserve for peace. It was called the Peace Forest. And unfortunately, these spaces now have become free passage for organized crime in our region. So in here, since we're talking about security, I would say that when we think about conflict and conflict triggered by environmental stress and climate, in our part of the world, the issue of organized crime, transnational organized crime, environmental crimes and illegal activities, and the issue of poverty and inequality is a combination that is really hurting the region. So when we think about responses, we have to think about transboundary, regional, over and over again. And this is a big challenge. We had with Adelphi an incredible workshop yesterday that precisely put an accent on that. Regional responses, multilateralism can provide regulations, policy advice, but then the translation needs to happen on the ground. And these, of course, not easy answers. And the one sentence that we have heard, you know, during the day, that one sentence is very, very difficult. And again, as I said just before, we need to learn how to embrace complexity and translate complexity into policy, into investment, into planning, into action at the national level.
Thank you. A lot of food for thought, and obviously it would be great to continue this interesting conversation, although I don't want to stand between the audience, a few final speakers, and the glass of wine that is well deserved. But yeah, thank you so much to our panelists. Certainly interesting to mention the ICJ ruling, and I guess time will tell sort of what impact that has on all of this work. But certainly a lot of promising action and complexity that was brought to light in this panel. So thank you again to all our excellent panelists, and then I will hand over back to our moderator.